That day, when my mother had just left the house, my stepfather also quietly walked out. I didn't pay much attention, just thinking that he went to work like every day after breakfast. I started cleaning up in the kitchen, washing the remaining dishes. The space was quiet, with only the sound of water running from the faucet and the sound of dishes hitting each other. I was so engrossed in my work that I didn't notice that a figure was approaching from behind. Suddenly, a rough hand slipped around my waist and squeezed tightly. The unexpected feeling made me stiffen. My breath caught. It was my stepfather. His breath was close to my ear, sending a chill down my spine. I tried to struggle, but that hand held me tight, not giving me a chance to move. At that moment, fear and a series of panicked questions arose in me. The familiar kitchen suddenly became cramped, suffocating to the point of difficulty breathing. And that's how my haunting story began. Hello, everyone. My name is Evelyn. I'm 22 and I've lived with my mom since I was a kid. My dad passed away when I was young. My mom, Yissa, is a strong and resilient woman. She did a lot to raise me. My childhood was full of love and care from my mom. Our lives weren't always easy, but my mom taught me to be independent and strong in the face of all difficulties. I always thought that we only needed each other. Everything changed when I was 18. The first time my mother told me that she'd met someone special and that we wanted to take our relationship further, I was quite surprised. After my father passed away, my mother hadn't paid much attention to love affairs. But this time she looked different. Her eyes were bright, and she had a smile on her lips. She told me that she wanted me to meet that man and introduce him as part of the family. When I met my future stepfather, Aiden, I was stunned. His name was Aiden. He was a tall man who looked much younger than his age. He was only a few years older than me. Even from a distance, no one would think he was my mother's lover. They would easily mistake him for my brother or friend. He had an attractive smile and deep blue eyes. This made it easy for others to feel sympathy at first sight. However, it was that youthfulness and elegance that made me feel confused. I couldn't imagine why someone like Aiden would choose my mother. My mom was over 40, but she was still very beautiful. I tried to act comfortable because I didn't want to upset her, but as time went on, I felt more and more that something was wrong. I asked her many times, "Mom, why did he marry you? He's so young. Could it be that he has some intention?" Every time, my mom brushed it off and scolded me. She was serious, her voice firm. "Evelyn, don't say that. Aiden loves my mother for who she is, not for anything else." I tried to believe my mother, but I still had doubts. Aiden was always polite and attentive to my mother. He even cooked, cleaned, and helped my mother with house work, which was something I had never seen in any other man. However, every time he looked at me, there was something strange in his eyes. It was not simply the eyes of an uncle looking at his stepdaughter, but rather something that it was difficult to articulate. I reassured myself that perhaps I was overthinking and needed to give him a chance to prove himself. My mother and Aiden married after just a few months of dating, and he quickly became an official part of the family. However, I couldn't deny that his presence in this small house had changed everything. Family meals are no longer the same, with a strange atmosphere between us and an awkwardness that I can't quite put a name to. However, I dare not say it because I know my mom is really happy. She trusts Aiden completely and sees him as the man who brings joy and comfort after years of loneliness. I didn't want to hurt my mom, but deep down I couldn't help but wonder if this man really loves my mom or if there's something I don't know about him. After a while, I got used to Aiden being around. I was a bit shy and awkward at first, but I have to admit that he brought a lot of joy to my mother. He often helped her with housework and cooking, and he always maintained a polite and proper attitude. Everything gradually stabilized, And I also tried to think that maybe my initial doubts were just my imagination. One evening after a long, tiring day at school, I went to the bathroom to relax since I hadn't had time to do the laundry. I hung my underwear up in the bathroom, planning to collect them and wash them with the other clothes. The next morning, after my shower, I wrapped a towel around myself and went to find some clothes to change into. When I came back to get my underwear, it was gone. I paused, thinking that maybe I had left it somewhere. I searched the bathroom, opening every cabinet door and bending down to look under the sink, but it was nowhere to be found. At first, I thought I must have left it in the bedroom. I went back to my room and rummaged through the pile of dirty clothes. I looked in the clothes and drawers, but couldn't find it. I had a strange feeling in my heart, making me confused. The pants were clearly hung there before I took a shower, but now they were gone without a trace. After changing, I walked into the living room, where Mom and Aiden were watching TV. They both looked very normal and comfortable. Mom even laughed out loud at a funny scene on the screen. I hesitated for a moment and then spoke up, "Mom, Stepdad, did anyone come into the bathroom just now? I just finished. I took a shower, but it seems like something is missing." They both turned to look at me, surprised. Mom asked what I lost. I hesitated a bit, not wanting to be too specific, and just replied, "Yes, just a personal item. My underwear was hanging in the attic in the bathroom, and now I can't find it." Aiden smiled lightly and shook his head. "Maybe you left it somewhere else," he sighed. Mom agreed. "Try to remember. Did you ever leave it somewhere else?" Aiden and I were sitting here the whole time. No one went into the bathroom. I didn't say anything more. I just nodded and went back to my room. I thought to myself that maybe I really did leave it somewhere and didn't remember. But the strange feeling didn't go away. I tried to brush it off. I told myself that it wasn't a big deal. But a part of me couldn't help but wonder. What if I didn't leave it? Then what happened? Since that day, I've had this strange feeling about my underwear. I don't know how to explain it or where it comes from. It's like there's an invisible gaze following me around. At first, I tried to calm myself down, thinking it was just me being too sensitive after my underwear disappeared. But that feeling didn't go away. It got worse. The strangest thing was when I took a shower. The bathroom door was made of frosted glass. From the outside, I could only see a vague shape inside, but not the details. From the inside, I could still make out a faint silhouette of someone if they were standing outside. At first, I didn't pay much attention, but gradually, every time I took a shower, I felt like there was a shadow passing by. It wasn't clear, just a faint image standing in front of the bathroom door for a few seconds, and then disappearing. The first time I noticed this was one evening. I had just stepped into the bathroom and turned on the hot water to relax when I saw a shadowy figure standing outside the glass door. I stopped holding my breath and called softly, "Who is it?" but there was no response. I walked closer to the glass door, trying to get a better look, but the figure had disappeared. When I opened the door to check the hallway, I saw that it was completely empty. There was no one there, just a faint light from the I stood in the living room for a few seconds, trying to listen for any noise, but the space was eerily quiet. I told myself that maybe I was seeing things, or that it was just a reflection of the light, but I still felt insecure. It didn't stop at the bathroom. In the days that followed, I felt like I was being watched throughout the house. Every time I walked down the hallway, I had a strange feeling that someone was watching me. Sometimes I would turn around, but the empty hallway just responded with cold silence. When I sit in the living room, I always feel like someone is watching me. Sometimes, when I walk through the kitchen or stand by the window, I catch a glimpse of someone passing behind me, just enough to make me shiver. But when I go to check, everything is dead silent, as if nothing happened during the day. I try to convince myself that it's all just my imagination. Maybe it's just my imagination, but I get this feeling that something's there with me. It's like the light from outside or the objects in the house are creating hallucinations that make me panic. At night, when the house is quiet and the surrounding spaces are dark, it gets worse. I always feel like my every step is echoing not only in my ears, but also in someone else's. Even in my own room at night, while I'm reading or trying to sleep, I hear a faint sound outside my door, like someone walking past and stopping. I heard a faint sound outside my door, like someone walking past and stopping. I went out to check a few times, but the hallway was empty and the doors to the other rooms were all closed. I went back to bed, trying to dispel the creepy feeling inside me. I didn't tell my mother about this, because I knew she would scold me for being too sensitive. "You're overthinking things," she would say. Aiden remained calm and composed as usual, showing no signs of anything unusual. His calmness made me feel even more strange. He was so cold that I couldn't read anything from him. As time passed, I felt more and more uneasy. Everything started to repeat itself when my underwear disappeared in the bathroom, just like before. I finished showering, put on my clothes, and stepped out to comb my hair, which was still wet. I stood in front of the mirror in the living room, slowly. I was drying my hair with a towel, enjoying the feeling of comfort after a long day, when I was about to go back to the bathroom to brush my teeth. The bathroom door suddenly opened and Aiden walked out from inside. He was neatly dressed, holding a towel in his hand, and said, "Go get a towel for Mommy," with a smile. I just nodded and continued my work, not thinking about anything else. However, when I returned to the bathroom, I suddenly realized that something was wrong. The underwear I had left on the floor was gone. I suddenly realized that I was no longer angry. I searched the bathroom from the basket to every corner, but the underwear was nowhere to be found. I had a strange feeling that something was wrong. This time it was stronger than before. I tried to remember everything, and then I thought I saw Aiden come out of the bathroom. What was he doing there? At first, I tried to reassure myself that he was just going to get something for his mother as he had said, but this coincidence made me unable to. I couldn't help but ask questions. I didn't rush to say anything, I kept my doubts to myself. From that moment on, Aiden's every action became the focus of my attention. I noticed a change in his behavior, which made me more alert than ever. After his underwear disappeared, I began to pay more attention to Aiden. I noticed every gesture, look, and action, but strangely, he seemed to know that I was paying attention to him. Every time I appeared, he seemed to be watching me. He was calm and behaving properly, as usual. Instead of reassuring me, though, his calm attitude made me even more confused. Am I overthinking things, or is he really trying to hide something? Things continued like that until one day everything began to reveal itself. It was Saturday. I had the day off at home, but my mother and Aiden still. I had to go to work. The morning passed as usual. Aiden woke up early and prepared breakfast with my mother. She was still smiling calmly and politely. After my mother finished eating, she quickly left the house to be on time for work. Aiden left for work on time, then turned back to tell me to stay home and rest if I needed anything. He said to call him if I did. I nodded, trying to force a smile, but inside I still had this indescribable feeling of unease. I finished breakfast, cleaned up the dining table, and started cleaning a little in the living room. The space was so quiet that I could clearly hear my footsteps echoing on the floor outside. The sunlight filtered through the window, illuminating the room that was familiar. But today gave me a strange feeling as I bent down to pick up a few things to organize them. A rough hand suddenly slid around my waist, squeezing me from behind. I froze, my breath caught in my chest. The feeling of surprise and fear made me completely unable to react immediately. "You're so cute," a low voice rang out right next to my ear. It was Aiden's voice. My heart stopped beating. I tried to struggle, but his hand was tight. "Let go of me," I shouted. He was trembling with fear, but he didn't answer right away. Instead, he just chuckled and fanned his breath over my neck, making me panic even more. "I didn't do anything, I just wanted to play a little," Aiden whispered, but he still held me tightly around the waist with no intention of letting go. His voice was a bit calm, but it was mixed with a coldness that was terrifying. The rough touch from his arms made me panic. I struggled harder, but he held me tighter, as if I was deliberately challenging my resistance. "What are you doing?" "Let me go," I yelled, my voice catching in my chest. Aiden didn't answer right away. He just leaned down to my ear, his breath on my neck, sending chills down my spine. "You're so nervous, Evelyn," he said. "I was just kidding." His tone wasn't playful, it was more like he was trying to calm me than reassure me. "I told you to stop," I yelled, my voice shaking and angry. I tried to push my hands away from him, but Aiden didn't let go. Instead, his grip tightened, making me feel trapped. His eyes were so dark that they shook me to the core. "You're so beautiful, Evelyn," he said softly, his voice full of intent that I didn't want to hear. "From the moment I first laid eyes on you," he said in a low, gritted voice that was still clear enough to sting my ears. But I didn't dare say anything, afraid your mother would find out. I waited and waited until today. I stood there, unable to believe what I had just heard. "What are you talking about?" My voice was shaking, almost breaking, but I tried to keep my composure. "How could you even think that? How could you do this to my mother?" Aiden didn't answer right away. He stared at me as if struggling with something inside, but then his eyes flashed with determination. He looked at me as if he was struggling with something inside, but then his eyes flashed with determination. "Your mother," he said slowly, "she's not the one I want. You're the one I've always wanted." I was so shocked that I couldn't speak. I couldn't believe that a man like Aiden, someone my mother loved and trusted, could say such horrible things just this once. "Evelyn," he continued, his voice a mixture of pleading and determination, "let me just this once. I swear I won't hurt your mother." "Is our secret?" I asked, struggling and screaming in anger. "You despicable man, what on earth are you thinking?" But his strength and the fierceness of his actions made it impossible for me to escape. I felt his arms tighten around me, his breath close to my ear, making me suffer and suffocate. Everything seemed to blur in that moment. I didn't understand why I had no more strength to resist. It was as if everything was under his control. Aiden's words, eyes, and even his touch had crossed all limits that whole day. Aiden and I had been together in a state of chaos that I couldn't even begin to describe. My emotions were all over the place, a mix of guilt, fear, and confusion. I couldn't believe that I had let things get out of hand, allowing something to happen that should never have happened. Time seemed to drag on forever, each minute and second seeming to last an age. I kept asking myself how I could have got into this situation. When my mother came home in the evening, she seemed surprised to see Aiden already home. Usually, my mother usually came home later than me because of her work, but today was different. She put down her bag and looked at Aiden with a questioning gaze. "You came home early today." "I usually see you come home later than me," she said. Aiden remained calm and composed. He smiled, walked over to my mother, reached out to take the bag, and replied, "I finished early today, thinking you'd be happy if we came home for dinner together. I've seen you work so hard lately." His words were so gentle and reasonable that I couldn't help but shiver. He seemed totally at ease about what had just happened. My mother smiled and didn't ask any more questions. She went into the kitchen and started preparing dinner as usual, completely unaware of anything unusual. but I was different. My every action and every emotion seemed to have changed. I no longer looked at Aiden the same way I used to. I had always tried to see him as part of the family, but now I looked at him with hatred and resentment. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the feeling of shame and guilt creeping into my heart since that day. Although everything between Aiden and I had stopped, I knew that this relationship could never return to the way it was before. I felt like I was constantly under a microscope, living under the same roof. I always felt Aiden's eyes lingering on me longer than usual. It was no longer the gaze of a husband towards his stepdaughter, but a look that made me feel uneasy. My mother, who had always trusted Aiden, didn't notice anything unusual. Every time I passed him, I tried to avoid eye contact, but I still had this feeling that I couldn't shake off. Every time I saw my mother smile, her eyes shining with happiness, I felt even more like a traitor. I wanted to speak out, to share this pain with my mother, but I didn't have the courage. The silence was like a prison that imprisoned me. I was stuck in a loop of endless thoughts that were driving me crazy. I couldn't take it anymore, so I decided to leave. I told my mother that I wanted to move out and that I was an adult and needed to learn to be independent. My mother was surprised at first and even a bit unwilling to accept it. She didn't understand why I made such a sudden decision when I had always wanted to be close to her. "You don't have to go anywhere. Staying home with me is fine. I don't want you to live alone." She said it was dangerous, but I was determined. I told her I was old enough to take care of myself and that this was what I needed to grow up and experience life. My mother finally agreed, even though she still had unanswered questions. I knew she didn't understand the real reason I left, and I didn't want her to know when I left that house. I didn't feel as relieved as I thought I would. As I'd hoped, the pain was still there, burning in my heart, but at least the distance would help me avoid Aiden's eyes and the horrible memories that I always wanted to forget. I knew this wasn't the first step to freedom, but the only way for me to save myself from the oppression and suffering that I couldn't overcome. Everyone's life has unexpected events and challenging moments. Sometimes we're faced with situations we never imagined. How we deal with these challenges shapes who we become. My story is a hard-won lesson about facing vulnerability, guilt, and how to protect yourself from bad things. What I want to share with everyone is this: never stay silent when you feel you are in danger or when you are being hurt by people who are supposed to protect you. Silence can temporarily save you from conflict, but it can also become a prison, trapping you in pain and isolation. Seek help, whether it is from family, friends, or other sources. Or you can turn to support organizations. Sometimes, the only way to free yourself and start afresh is to speak the truth. It's also important to listen to your feelings. If you feel unsafe or uncomfortable in your own space, you need to make a decision to change. Leaving isn't an escape, it's a way to protect yourself, find peace, and heal. Finally, I'd like to tell parents to pay attention to their children's feelings and behaviors. Sometimes, small changes in attitude and ambiguous words can be signs of a deeper problem you don't realize. Showing care and understanding not only help your children feel safe, but can also save them from the pain they dare not speak out. Life always has challenges, but we have the right to choose how to face them. He'll be brave and strong, because you deserve to live a peaceful and happy life. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thanks everyone for listening. Bye for now.